This guy was the most badass that ever existed. He ended up dying after defeating the most powerful monster. After that, you'd imagine the world became peaceful, but no, because of the stupidity of the people themselves. Our legend came back after 42 years in the body of a teenager. He was so pissed off that he decided to become the most powerful awakened being in this world with his supreme punch power. The story begins on day 5691 after the disaster inside the Dungeon of the Black Tomb, where some people were calling for their leader. They begged Junwoo to hold on and open his eyes, but the man was gravely injured. The severely wounded leader finally managed to open his eyes. He asked about the subjugation. One of his companions began to cry heavily. With a gigantic monster lying behind them, everyone said that the subjugation of the Gigantiana was a success. Junwoo smiled, happy that they had succeeded. Gigantiana, an extremely powerful monster, which took them 3 years to capture with countless sacrifices, but in the end they won. His subordinates begged their leader to hold on until the medical team arrived. Looking to the side, he realized that half of his body was disconnected. He spoke to his vice leader, asking her to take care of the rest of the team. With a smile, the protagonist said that they could finally move forward. As his eyes closed, he said that he could finally say it, apologizing to everyone. Junwoo, the greatest hunter in South Korea and the one who created the subjugation system, met his end in the fight against the strongest monster. Suddenly, a boy received a slap on the back of his neck. Some boys asked if he hadn't been told to bring food for them during the break. They asked if the boy wanted to starve them, questioning whether they should teach him some sense. Irritated and confused, he wondered why he was there. Junwoo felt himself falling into an abyss as a voice said that this was a futile sacrifice. He tried to understand if he was truly dead. Angering the protagonist, the voice said that with his death, there was no one left to stop them. Enraged, he claimed that with the system he developed for each individual and domain, many stronger hunters would emerge. The being said it liked this system idea, then simply said 42 years, leaving the protagonist confused. It continued, saying it would make him return in 42 years, confessing a hope this future would become reality. Still very angry, Junwoo continued falling into the void while saying that whoever the being was, it was nothing more than a cockroach crawling through the streets. Suddenly, the protagonist slowly opened his eyes. Confused, he wondered what had happened and where he was. He continued questioning what had happened, saying he was sure he had died fighting Gigantiana. Looking in the mirror, he did not recognize this person and felt extremely confused. He touched his face, realizing he was young again, also noticing that it wasn't the same appearance he had as a child. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door, startling him. He was in a white room with bright light. A doctor along with a man noticed that he had finally woken up. The man began to say that he was a police officer and asked the boy to provide details about the case, leaving the boy even more confused. The man started stating the protagonist's information, his name, age, and date of birth, 350,303. However, Junwoo said he was born in 1975. Both the man and the doctor looked at the boy, not understanding anything. Ignoring this information, the man asked again if he remembered the events that triggered the accident. He began to say that he had suffered many injuries while defeating Gigantiana in the Dungeon of the Black Tomb, making both of them even more confused. Both started discussing whether the boy was in good condition, and the doctor said that maybe he just needed rest. The police officer asked the doctor if the boy really believed he was a hunter. He explained that it wasn't uncommon in cases of extreme delirium. The protagonist asked what was happening, and the man asked again if he really didn't remember. He explained that Junwoo had been ambushed by Bangsini yesterday, but because it happened at dawn, there were no witnesses or news recordings. The man asked again if the boy didn't remember anything. The man put away his notebook, saying he understood. He said it was fine and that they would stop for today, handing him a card with his contact information, asking the boy to call him if he remembered anything. The doctor started to leave, asking him to rest. However, the boy asked him to wait. A little nervous, the protagonist asked what year it was. The doctor looked back at the boy, not quite understanding his question. However, he replied, saying it was March 1, 2051. Shocked, he said that couldn't be true. In disbelief, Junwoo opened the curtains of his room. He felt extremely confused, wondering what this was. The Seoul he remembered was an abandoned city, left in ruins by battles with monsters. It was flooded with homeless people and refugees suffering from all kinds of diseases and hunger. Seeing the city in order, he couldn't believe this was the same place from his time. The buildings were in excellent condition. Healthy people with happy families walked through the streets. The protagonist began laughing uncontrollably. With tears in his eyes, he said that there was no way not to believe it. He saw people living their lives normally. Remembering his companions, Junwoo wondered if they were alive, affirming that after these 42 years, they were probably all together. Suddenly, the protagonist remembered the voice that spoke to him. Extremely scared, the boy realized that only now he noticed that exactly the period the voice had mentioned had passed. Suddenly, a loud crash occurred. An alert echoed saying that a major incident was occurring at Gon University Hospital. A large portal appeared in the middle of the hospital, and people were running while asking for the association to be called. He ran desperately toward the door. Excited, the protagonist said he was thrilled to see his subjugation 42 years after his death and to witness realize how much had improved. The boy saw a group of people and became curious about what they were looking at. Scared, he tried to understand what was happening. Seeing the crowd, the protagonist wondered why they were gathered there. A soldier informed them that this time an advanced hunter would participate in the subjugation, and for safety, everyone should keep a certain distance. He warned that in 10 minutes they would bring the monster out of the dungeon. Remembering his past, the protagonist was asking someone if they really didn't know. He was giving a lecture, saying that from the moment a monster leaves the dungeon, they can cause mass destruction. Thus, subjugation must be carried out within the portal. This is a fundamental and absolutely essential rule. He orders everyone to remember this, and as expected, they all respond affirmatively. Irritated, he begins walking through the crowd, calling the hunters crazy. All the newspapers were preparing to cover the subjugation. The boy suddenly shouts, asking what they are doing. Frustrated, he questions how they can allow monsters to leave the dungeon. People were asking why the boy was so agitated. The protagonist says that hunting monsters isn't child's play, and gathering a crowd to watch it is absurd. Unexpectedly, everyone starts shouting, saying that Go Unchi is there. A white van approaches them. Someone starts stepping out of the vehicle. It was a girl emerging from the van wielding a sword. The crowd begged for her attention. Scared, Junwoo realizes these are the hunters of today. He finds it very curious that the girl is younger than he imagined, questioning what her abilities might be. Everyone cheers for her as Yeonchul walks towards the gate. She activates her connection with the system, causing her bracelet to glow with a purple light. The system grants her access, allowing her to enter the B rank category and use the available abilities from that moment. One of the soldiers warns that the monster is coming out of the dungeon. The portal begins to shine brightly, with golden lightning bolts emerging from it. A large black paw steps out of the dungeon. It was a beast with massive fangs. Standing in front of the girl was a large humanoid wolf-like monster. She uses her ice magic, a crystallization ability. The giant wolf charges toward her. Banshee easily dodges the attack. With just a swing of her sword, she launches a massive ice attack. Some people are amazed by her movements, saying it looks like a dance. Children told their parents they wanted to become hunters when they grew up. The protagonist feels a mix of discomfort and relief. The girl lands grandly on the ground after the powerful attack. Once again, she readies her blade. She launches several ice fragments at her enemy. Struck by the attack, the monster screams in pain as its body is pierced. One of the wolf's eyes glows red as it stares at its opponent. However, its body was already completely incapable of moving, causing it to collapse as the girl landed. Leaving the protagonist even more surprised, everyone shouts her name, celebrating her victory. He starts laughing, seemingly happy with what he sees. Surprisingly, he says, "That's not it." Extremely irritated, the protagonist asks if this is what they call elimination. He stands still, furious, saying this is a mess. The boy notices that a rookie hunter dresses like a celebrity and relies solely on their own abilities to fight. The rearguard doesn't even bother to provide support to the huntress. And what stresses him out the most about all of this is the fact that they are carrying out a subjugation, which could result in countless situations on a crowded street full of civilians. He grits his teeth, trying to contain his anger. Failing to hold it back, he loses control. The protagonist kicks one of the cameraman's cameras. A soldier approaches him, asking him to stop and questioning what he's doing. Irritated, the boy asks what they think they're doing, letting a monster leave the dungeon. Junwoo questions if they don't know that the monster can go berserk after leaving a dungeon and fail to adapt to this dimension. He asks what they would do if someone used an ability and the crowd scattered, or if the monster acted unpredictably. Furthermore, the rearguard is completely exposed. The protagonist asks again if this is what they call dungeon elimination, saying it looks more like a street performance. The girl asks if he attends the academy. Junwoo is confused by her question, and she says it's all basic material they teach there. She mentions that the boy's enthusiasm is great, but he shouldn't think everything is covered in a classroom. The girl explains that the field is different from what students usually imagine. He asks if she's calling this a field. In a chilling tone, he asks how this brat can call this a battlefield in front of him. Even the huntress is startled by his reaction. Two security guards appear, saying the boy cannot act that way. He says everyone keeps shouting "Go Unche," cheering for her. Junwoo claims that the girl should be ashamed to call herself a hunter with that level of skill. With a smile, she says that school life can be a little difficult. Confused, the boy tries to understand what she meant by that. Later, near some buildings, the protagonist was deep in thought, sitting on a bench. He remembers that voice telling him it would bring him back in 42 years, and that he should pray for this future to come true. Mentally, he states that if Gigantiana is revived, today's hunters won't be able to stop her, so he must prepare. Suddenly, he has an idea. Remembering his squad, the boy believes he must try to find them, but reality hits him. He questions how he will find them. The boy realizes after thinking about it that Brat mentioned an academy. With that, he understands that only one person could have created a school for hunters in recent years, Bao Wushik. Returning to his past, he remembers asking what that person meant by an academy. His friend emphasized what he had just said. Wushik said he wanted the war to end in his generation, but since that didn't seem possible, he would create an academy. He asked the leader what the school's name should be. Junwoo questioned if he was really the one who should decide decide that. The protagonist told him just to keep it simple, like Korea Hunter Academy or something along those lines. His companion was stunned by such a lack of imagination. He arrives in front of the school, noticing that the name was literally Hunter Academy. The boy is even disheartened to see the guy actually did what he suggested. He also notices that the school is ridiculously large. Someone asks what that student is doing there. The guard says he's never seen him before, asking if he's a new student. However, the boy denies it and says he just has some things to resolve. The guard says that if he's there to see Uncha, he won't find her at the gate. Jungwoo denies it. The protagonist asks if the man knows someone named Wooshik. The man asks if he's talking about the president. The boy confirms, saying he'd like to meet him. The guard asks why someone who isn't even a student wants to meet the president. The man asks if the boy is a special admission student. Confused, the protagonist wonders what that means. Jungwoo decides to just go along with it, confirming that he's a special admission student. Immediately, the guard asks him to follow. The boy is surprised that the guard looked at him with a certain pity. The man guides the boy to a room. Suddenly, he notices something and gets nervous. Seeing a large painting with his old face on it, Jungwoo asks what that is. The guard gets angry and orders the kid to stop yelling inside the school. The protagonist starts apologizing for it. He feels embarrassed by this exaggeration caused by his friend. Jungwoo notices several paintings with plaques containing explanations below them. One plaque said that leader Jungwoo's motto was, "A hunter is made of 99% effort and 1% talent." Embarrassed and nervous, the protagonist wonders if he ever actually said that in his life. The guard knocks on a door. He asks for permission from the president, introducing himself as Manager Park. Wooshik tells him to come in. The man tells the kid to be careful and not do anything wrong. The guard introduces the protagonist, saying he's a special admission student. The president looks curious about this. The manager excuses himself, saying he'll take his leave. The door closes as Jungwoo stares at his old companion. The man begins walking toward him, saying this is strange. Stopping in front of the boy, he says he wasn't notified that a special admission student would be arriving this semester. With a piercing look, he asks who this brat is. He tries to intimidate the boy, but the protagonist interrupts him, calling him by his name. At that moment, the president freezes in shock. Jungwoo starts saying he almost didn't recognize him, calling the man old. He points to his face, asking if Wooshik doesn't recognize him. The president rushes toward the phone, saying he's never seen someone so insane. On the phone, he asks the manager to come back and remove this lunatic from his office, ordering him never to let anyone in without verification again. But suddenly, the boy asks how Sunyoung is doing. The man asks how the kid knows that name. Jungwoo says she was the woman who always rejected him, leaving him crying. With a smile, the protagonist says it apparently didn't work out. Wooshik grabs him by the collar. The man starts yelling, asking who he is and how he knows these things. With a smile, the boy says that things have really changed. Even Wooshik is grabbing him now. Shooting a deadly glare at the president, Jungwoo says he's getting too bold. His old companion, scared, quickly lets him go. The boy adjusts his clothes while calling the man by his name. He asks how many times he's told his friend this, that whether facing monsters or facing people, if you're going to take control, do it properly, making the man see his leader standing right in front of him. At the base camp of the subjugation management headquarters, someone was yelling furiously, demanding to know what the person was doing. A man was holding a woman hostage, asking if they hadn't heard him say they needed food and antibiotics. Jungwoo questioned what was happening, and his companion explained that someone who had been expelled due to illness was now asking for food and medicine. The leader asked if it was truly an infectious disease. Bauman mentioned that the man's younger sister was sick, which raised their suspicions. The protagonist simply stared at them without saying anything. To everyone's surprise, he began walking towards the man and his hostage. Frightened, the man started shouting, ordering him to stop. However, Jungwoo remained silent, simply staring at him. Terrifying the woman even more, the man asked if the protagonist wanted him to kill her. However, the leader told him to go ahead. Both the man and the girl were utterly confused by what he had just said. The protagonist remarked that with monsters roaming freely, it wouldn't be surprising if one were to die suddenly. The man began asking what this lunatic was talking about. With an indifferent look, Jungwoo asked if he didn't have the courage to kill her. He asked if the man didn't want to save his sister and said that if that was the case, he shouldn't care how many people had to die. The leader asserted that if you want to save someone, you must be prepared to sacrifice others. That's the world they live in now. At that moment, he said the phrase, "If you want to take control, do it the right way." Staring at the man, Jungwoo said that if he couldn't do it, he should stop acting so futilely. The protagonist told him that either he did it or he would die along with his sister. The man shoved the girl aside, clearly furious. He decided to try to hit the protagonist, but with absurd ease, Jungwoo dodged the blow. Quickly, he grabbed the man by the arm, throwing him to the ground. The man screamed in pain while airborne. He crashed down, creating a loud impact. Despite being in intense pain, the man tried to get up again. He cursed the protagonist while catching his breath. Without even thinking, the man attacked Jungwoo again. The leader equipped the patellar yellow ring, saying that's the spirit. He punched the opponent's knife, leaving him stunned. The leader positioned his hand as if he were about to flick his fingers. He activated an ultra-high comprehension attack, explosive flow. With a simple flick of his finger, the protagonist sent the man flying. He slammed into a concrete wall, leaving large cracks in it. The man looked utterly defeated as he stared at Junwoo. The leader called for Byungmin, who quickly approached him. The protagonist ordered him to form a search team to find the man's sister and gather any remaining medicine. The soldier asked what would happen if they were indeed sick, but Junwoo said that if that were the case, the man would already be dead. The leader told him that if he understood, he should hurry and move as quickly as possible. He ordered another subordinate to take the man to the Junyang dormitory, feed him once he woke up, and bring him to training in the morning. His subordinate asked if that meant the man would become one of them. While walking away, the protagonist said that from now on, they were on the same team. That man was the current president of the academy, who was shocked to see his former leader in front of him again. Woo-shik asked what had happened to him. Junwoo replied that he didn't know either, and that he had simply woken up like this. His former companion was clearly confused by all of this. The protagonist said that apparently he still couldn't believe his words. The current president asked if that wasn't the normal reaction. After all, someone coming back from the dead in a child's body isn't exactly common. Junwoo asked if he should tell the story about when Woo-shik wet his pants during his first hunt. However, the man punched the child in the face. Mr. Park was running towards the president's office. Remembering the anger with which Woo-shik had cursed him, he wondered how he had ended up in this situation. A student with special admission often comes from difficult circumstances. A student seeking out the president in such a way confused him. In front of the door, Park realized that lamenting wouldn't help. His only choice was to beg for forgiveness. He began to open the door while calling for the president, but then he heard something. The boy was making Woo-shik do several push-ups. The man was left completely speechless, slowly closing the door as the child ordered the president to stay focused. He shut the door without taking his eyes off the strange scene, finally managing to close it completely. The protagonist was clearly angry while holding ice against his face. His former companion, on the other hand, was extremely nervous. Junwoo said that it still hurt. His subordinate apologized, saying that it was a very embarrassing memory for him. A cup of coffee sat on the table. The boy commented that the world had changed so much. Woo-shik noted that it must have been terrifying. It was as if, in an instant, everything had changed. The protagonist said it was, adding that the biggest change was in subjugation. He recounted seeing soldiers lure a monster into the middle of the city to defeat it. The president asked if that was near the hospital. The man implied that he could imagine what his leader was thinking, saying that Junwoo must be trying to understand how things had ended up this way. The man explains that after his leader defeated Gigantiana, the world truly became peaceful. He also explains that really dangerous monsters have become rare. They consider public subjugations acceptable. Extremely angry, the boy says that there's a limit to how reckless people can be, but the president states that there's another reason. He explains that it's difficult to sustain this field without sponsorship, and that since the associations are interconnected, the operations are very difficult and complex. Since most people's interest is in games, hunters are becoming almost like celebrities, and thus, this field has developed. Very angry, the boy says that it's not too late for them to change all of this. The leader says that he's the president of the academy, so from now on, he must re-educate the children. Woo-shik says that he has already explained. His subordinate says again that he can't change educational policies alone. Junwoo asks if he's a puppet leader. The boy questions where the other members are, saying that they should join forces, but Woo-shik says that they are the ones who control everything. The president claims to hate saying this, but he is sure that most of the members will not accept the fact that he has returned. Rubbing his head, the protagonist states that this is very messy. His subordinate tries to calm him down, saying that the world is now peaceful. However, the protagonist says that Gigantiana will be revived. Upon hearing this, he freezes in fear after receiving the information. Desperate, he asks his leader if that monster will really be revived. Extremely scared, he continues questioning if it's the same Gigantiana they defeated. Junwoo says that he also didn't want to believe it, but unfortunately, it's true. He explains that he was accepting his death when he met that guy who said he would return in 42 years and that Gigantiana would be revived. Shocked, the president asks if maybe he misunderstood, also questioning if he really believes this. Furious, Junwoo says that someone like him returning in this way after 42 years of being dead is proof enough. He begins to leave, saying that he came here trying to find a solution. Woo-shik asks what he plans to do, and the boy says that the guy already knows. With a terrifying look, he says that just like before, he will take care of everything himself. The president states that no matter how good he is, with his current body, he won't be able to do it, but the protagonist asserts that he will kill him again. Junwoo suddenly has an idea. He asks Woo-shik for his old weapon, since without it, will be harder. The president says that his sword is at the headquarters of the Supernatural Dimension Management Association, and that he cannot retrieve it. The guy explains that the person responsible is the executive director Seok-do. The protagonist asks if he wasn't the youngest member of his team. With a smile, the leader assures that this is perfect. After all, the guy was extremely loyal to him. The president warns that even though he was that person, currently he is one of the least happy with his return. The boy begins to get irritated as nothing is going right, but his subordinate says that Seok-do's granddaughter attends this school. He also tells him that according to information, Seok-do never says no to her. Junwoo is is confused by this information. He realizes that perhaps the best way out is to get closer to his granddaughter. However, the president says there's a catch. The protagonist asks the girl's name. Woo-shik says that he already knows who she is. After all, she was at the subjugation in the hospital. Remembering Eunchae, he realizes that it won't be that easy. Startled, the boy asks if his old companion is really the grandfather of that girl. The president confirms his suspicion. He states that it's all over in this case, since after seeing that horrible subjugation, he scolded her in an extremely aggressive manner. Very worried, Woo-shik asks if he hurt anyone. The protagonist reassures him that he only said a few things with some anger and then left. Suddenly, the boy starts to think of something. He screams, saying that he has no idea what to do. Suddenly, his leader starts calling him with his hand. Looking at the boy's hand, Woo-shik doesn't quite understand what he wants with this. The president asks if Junwoo needs something. The protagonist tells him to bring the registration form. He's startled, questioning if the boy is really going to do that. The boy tells him to bring it quickly. The protagonist says that just as his subordinate had said, he will need to get closer to Seokdu's granddaughter to get his weapon back. Still shocked, the president asks if he really wants to enroll at this age. Junwoo doesn't fully understand what was said. Woo-shik says that the protagonist is too old, so he won't be able to fit in with the kids, asserting that either he will be bullied or he will bully. Extremely angry, the old man starts saying that he won't make friends, and once he gets his weapon back, he'll quit the academy. The president says that his leader is truly relentless, smiling and saying that this was the reason he died before them. Woo-shik hands the registration form to his leader. The man again asks the boy not to be so harsh with the kids, questioning if he looks like some kind of delinquent. The guy again asks him to tolerate some things, even if they are annoying, making the protagonist extremely irritated. He starts begging his leader not to treat the kids as he treated his squad. The next day, he was already at the Hunter Academy. He was assigned to Class 1E. Even though he was determined, the protagonist admits he's nervous. Well, anyway, he'll have to maintain a discreet profile until he finds a way to get closer to the girl. Suddenly, someone asks what he's doing there. The girl says that if he's not going to enter, he should at least get out of the way of the door. Somewhat awkwardly, he says he was about to enter. The girl approaches him, staring at him. She asks if he's the dog from yesterday. Confused, the boy questions what this dog thing's about. She says she heard that a special student would be transferred, but she didn't expect it to be the dog from yesterday. The girl says that this isn't on her tab. Junwoo says that's not what he's asking, questioning again what dog means. He remains confused, not understanding what just happened. As he enters the room, the boy states that today's kids are different. He looks inside the room, noticing something. All the children were staring at him with their mouths open. They were wondering if this wasn't the dog from yesterday. Others said that this was the kid from yesterday, incredulous that he was there. Uncomfortable, he starts wondering what's going on since it's his first day and yet everyone is looking at him. He decides to just ignore it, assuming that in his imagination, the Hunter Academy would be something completely different. The protagonist asks where he can sit while looking at something. On a table, there was a bouquet of flowers. He is extremely shocked, stating that the president has gone too far. Sitting down, the boy says that this is a waste of money and resources, as he won't even be able to eat it. Suddenly, someone screams very loudly. The kid was shouting, cursing the teacher, claiming that he wasn't the inconvenience there. Entering the room, the guy says that waking up in the morning to go to school is very annoying. All the students stay silent, not doing or saying anything. Observing that brat, the protagonist says that he's just another one of those who think they're the ruler of the class. Suddenly, the kid looks at Junwoo. He opens a wide smile, planning something. The brat approaches, saying that there's something new here. Getting very close to the protagonist, he asks if he's not the dog from yesterday. The kid says that this is the boy who messed with Eunchae during the public hunt, and that apparently he's the special transfer as well. A bit nervous, Junwoo questions how he knows about that. Laughing, the kid says that the video of the protagonist was posted on all social media, and the old man is confused, not understanding what that is. Slapping the kid's head, the brat says that even so, he managed to get it. Smiling, he says that the protagonist picked a fight with Eunchae and they're still in the same class, calling Junwoo crazy. Surprisingly, the guy extends his hand, saying it's a pleasure to meet him. The kid asks if the protagonist knows him, saying his name is Jusuk. Even angry, the leader remembers Woo-shik, telling him to tolerate any irritating behavior from his classmates. The protagonist shakes the boy's hand, introducing himself in return. The kid starts laughing, asking if the protagonist's parents believe that giving him the name of a great hero will make him a great hunter. He laughs on the outside while internally burning with rage, dying to beat the brat up. Jusuk asks the protagonist what the girl is like up close. The kid starts saying that her body isn't bad and her face is actually quite cute. Laughing, he says that by the way, he doesn't know where her grandfather is the director, but that maybe that's why she has such a rude personality. The jerk starts boasting, claiming that if it weren't for that, she would be exactly his type. However, someone catches their attention, telling them not to exaggerate so much. The brat asks what the girl wants, while the protagonist notices that it's the same girl from before. She tells Jusuk to look in the mirror before judging someone's appearance. Angry, he asks if the girl has lost her mind, saying that he let it slide a few times, but now she's crossing the line. The girl states that there's nothing distinguishing them from each other after all, they're all in the same class. The jerk starts yelling, saying he was originally from Class B. The girl responds, saying he ended up in Class E because of incompetence, making the the brat even more angry. She says that if it weren't for his father's connections, he would have been expelled a long time ago. The boy yells that she's crossed the line while getting ready to slap the girl. She simply closes her eyes, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, the brat gets scared by something. He had been thrown away. Everyone is surprised by what happened, not knowing what to do. The protagonist had kicked the boy, who, even on the floor, asks if Junwoo had gone mad, but he just stares at him with an indifferent look. Jusuk calls out to the protagonist. He asks if the boy just kicked him, and staring at Junwoo, he questions if he wants him to do it again. As he gets up, the brat asks if he's having trouble understanding things on his first day. Extremely angry, he says that it seems like it will be necessary to beat him until his head is back in place. The protagonist starts laughing a lot. He calls the brat a little delinquent and asks if he has ever been close to death to be saying such things. Preparing to punch him, Jusuk says he doesn't understand what this transfer student is talking about. Dodging his opponent's attack, the protagonist notes that the punch was terrible. With that punch, he left his right side completely exposed. Suddenly, the teacher enters the room and asks what they are doing. Still angry, the little delinquent laments the fact that the teacher appeared just now. As he leaves, Jusuk says he'll see the protagonist later. The brat claims he'll make Junwoo's school life much more interesting from now on. The president was in his office, extremely stressed and thinking about something. Wooshik asks how his leader can act like this on the first day. Indignant, he says he's holding back a lot. The president confirms that he managed to handle the school violence committee for now, but he doesn't know how that person will handle it. The guy says that the father of that kid is the minister of the subjugation department in Korea, also explaining that he is the youngest son, and even with all the chaos he causes, he doesn't appear in any news thanks to his father's power. Junwoo finally understands why that brat is the way he is. The president goes on to say that he's involved with someone problematic. Wooshik says that he won't be able to help him again if he gets involved with Jusuk again. He leaves the office while taking a deep breath. Out of nowhere, the girl is already waiting for him outside, asking why he did that. She questions if he doesn't know what kind of person Jusuk is. The protagonist says that he's never liked people like him. Curious, the boy asks why she's picking a fight with that brat, since he wasn't even talking about her, but rather about Hunche. Suddenly, he is very surprised by something. Looking at her a little more, the boy realizes that the girl is extremely similar to the hunter he knows. Also, her name is Go Ah-hyun. Surprised, he asks if the girl is Unchi's sister, and the girl simply confirms. He gets excited, realizing he can start getting closer to her, but crushing his hope, she says she's not a direct sister. Ah-hyun explains that they have different mothers, so she's not even in the family registry, basically making them strangers. Trying to ignore all of that, he asks if the girl has any connection with her grandfather. With an irritated look, the girl says that she has a great relationship with him. After all, it was that old man who took her out of the registry. At that moment, he's speechless, realizing he made a mistake. She asks if he helped her, thinking he could get a big connection. The girl says she doesn't blame him, stating that a special admission student is practically prey, needing to rely on someone. Ah-hyun admits she thought he might be different, but in the end, he's just like everyone else, only concerned with status. He says that it seems like she's not any different either. After all, she made all these assumptions just because he's a special admission student. The protagonist starts to leave, saying that all this talk about status, families, and special admissions is ridiculous. Angry, she says that soon he will see what the life of a special admission student is like, and he asks if that's true. The girl continues watching the protagonist leave. Not quite understanding, she just stays silent. After some time, while the birds were singing, Junwoo assumes that he thought it would be easy, but now he'll have to find another way to get closer to Eunchae. Suddenly, someone approaches him from behind. The big guy asks if he's the special transfer student from Class E. Not wanting to talk much, he questions what the guy wants. Two more brats appear. On the other side of the hallway, two more little delinquents gather. As expected, the protagonist was surrounded. The big guy tells him to follow him unless he wants to be beaten and humiliated right there. The boy starts getting irritated again, scratching his head in frustration. They head to a storage room at the academy. Entering it, it's completely dark. He stops, unsure of where this is going. The protagonist understands that kids like these exist in every era. Suddenly, someone speaks from within the darkness, asking what the fake Junwoo is doing there. Chuseok says that before they start creating unforgettable school memories, he needs to ask something. The wannabe delinquent asks if a student like Junwoo really wants to pick a fight with someone important like him. Already losing patience, the protagonist asks why everyone keeps talking about this special admission student business everywhere he goes. Mockingly, the brat says that it's very important. Extremely enraged, he says that someone who entered the academy thanks to support for the disadvantaged is not on equal footing. Juseok says that he won't do anything since he's restricted, but his companions will, and you should feel lucky about that. One of the brats tries to kick him from behind. However, this is very easy for the protagonist, and he simply dodges. The guy falls to the ground, and the protagonist mocks him. The leader of the little delinquents says that he's really good at dodging. They start insulting Junwoo, saying that he's just a student with special admission. Again, another one of them tries to hit him. As he dodges the attack from another student, he notices that nowadays they don't even teach basic skills anymore. The big guy charges at him while insulting him, calling him a rat. Junwoo lands a knee to the boy's face. He simply collapses to the ground, unresponsive. The boy's face is completely smashed and blood is coming from his nose. After taking down the biggest one, all the little delinquents are shocked by the situation. The boys are terrified. Calmly, the protagonist asks if they have a problem and if they weren't saying they would take him down. Junwoo questions if Jusuk didn't say he would create unforgettable memories at the academy. With a terrifying look, the protagonist says that if they want to cause a fire, they should do it the right way. Ah-hyun was walking normally through one of the hallways of the academy. She begins to curse at someone while quickening her pace. Remembering the protagonist's words, the girl gets even more irritated by the fact that he said those things without knowing anything. The girl informs everyone that the special admission student was called by Jusuk and his gang. Some students start talking, saying that it's already too late and that this will be the record for dropouts. They begin to wonder if anyone informed the teachers, but most say they don't want to get involved in this mess. She turns her face, saying that someone like that boy always gets something like this for acting so presumptuously. Once again, recalling his words, saying that the girl was just like everyone else, making assumptions without knowing him. She suddenly stops in the hallway. Suddenly, Avium starts running desperately through the academy. Back to the protagonist, he was facing the remaining three. Jusuk curses at his subordinates, telling them to continue until they crush him. They hesitate a little, unsure about confronting the boy. Disappointed, Junwoo asks why all this drama over just a nosebleed. He says that their physical and mental abilities are exactly on the level of a small child. The wannabe delinquent gets extremely angry about this. The brat tells one of his companions to use his ability. They start saying that if they get caught, they'll be expelled, but Jusuk says they just need to make sure they won't be seen. Both of them get a little nervous while they start using their abilities. He notices that they're all wearing bracelets similar to Unshi's, wondering if that's how they managed to avoid being armed. All the boys look at the protagonist, waiting for his reaction. Suddenly, someone falls among them. Jusuk says that they are all losers, while using his bracelet to access the system. His friends try to warn him that there will be consequences if he gets caught again, but he tells them all to shut up. He uses his rank D system to access their abilities. The protagonist just watches the boy, not quite understanding what's happening. The brat grabs a black trident. He starts saying that he will make the boy beg for mercy. The protagonist asks if the wannabe delinquent knows how to use this ability. Laughing, the guy starts calling Junwoo blind, saying that he's already using it. As he picks up a broom from the floor, the protagonist asks if the boy really thinks that summoning the weapon is all that's necessary. It shows that apparently they really know very little about this world. The boy points the broomstick at the brat. Extremely furious, the former leader asks how the boy dares to use an ability against someone else outside of the dungeon. In the college office, the teachers were talking about the fact that the special admission student caused trouble on his first day. The teacher admits that he's really brave for deciding to fight against Jusuk from Class B. He asks the teacher if this means that the boy has no talent to be a hunter, and she denies it, saying that the case is different. The guy gets confused, asking what she means by that. She explains that student Junwoo was excluded from the aptitude test evaluation. The teacher says that this is given to those whose combat classification is so exceptional that it can't even be measured. So far, the only student to receive the excluded status was Unche, but apparently, this student is on the same level as her. They start wondering why you didn't go to Class A, but the teacher says that this was an order from the president. Both of them don't understand why he doesn't want to stand out, since that's everyone's goal. Suddenly, someone calls for the teachers. It was Ah-hyun, who was clearly tired and panting. She starts explaining the situation. Back to the storage room, the protagonist was blocking the boy's attacks with just the broomstick he picked up from the floor. Extremely irritated, he continues striking. In return, Junwoo easily defends all the attacks. Mentally, the brat wonders what's happening. After all, just activating the ability should have been enough. Seeing the protagonist defend his attacks with only a broomstick, he gets even angrier. Jusuk curses again, questioning what's going on. The boy again easily blocks his opponent's attack. The brat continues striking the protagonist. He says that his combat ability is not meant to be used so carelessly. Pulling back, the wannabe delinquent asks again what a student like him could possibly know about his abilities. While dodging and defending the attacks, Junwoo warns that the ability of this weapon came from a monster that controls shadows. With a hint of sarcasm, the protagonist asks what ability the brat thinks he's using with the fly swatter. This was an ability given to him by his father in elementary school, and thanks to it, the brat was able to join Class B. After graduation, his spot as a hunter in the affiliation was practically guaranteed, and he could even become a field agent. Jusuk gets more and more enraged. Tired, the protagonist disarms his opponent. The system alerts that the weapon was separated from its user, requesting that it be retrieved immediately. In front of him, Junwoo had the trident in his hands. He tells the brat to pay attention. While casting a frightening glance, he says that this is how you use this weapon. A bright flash pierces through the windows. In the blink of an eye, all the light in the area disappears. Everyone is horrified, realizing that it's as if it suddenly turned night. They feel relieved as the darkness begins to pass. One of them tells his friend to look at his feet. Everyone is terrified when they see their own shadows. They realize that it's as if their shadows have become disconnected from their bodies. Looking at his hand, the fat guy realizes that there's no trace of shadow left, not even those of the objects inside. Looking at the protagonist, everyone realizes that the shadows are taking over his body. Ju-seok is utterly horrified, not understanding what's happening. Upon seeing him, he doesn't comprehend what is in front of him. Seeing Jungwoo's demonic figure, the guy wonders if this is really his weapon. Frightened, the brat starts panting heavily. In his fear, he wets his pants. Jungwoo places the trident against the brat's neck while he begs for his life. But Jungwoo ignores him and raises the weapon, preparing to strike. The trident shines as it moves toward him. The wannabe delinquent starts crying desperately. The system notifies that 1 minute has passed and the weapon will be sealed by force, causing it to disappear from the protagonist's hand. Seeing Ju-seok lying on the floor and foaming at the mouth, Jungwoo states that this should be enough. He starts kicking the boy's leg, trying to wake him up. The boy tells the delinquent to wake up already. The protagonist tells him he didn't do anything and orders the brat to pull himself together and get up. Still scared, he does as instructed. The protagonist calls for him again. Staring at him ominously, Jungwoo tells him to answer. The boy tells him that skills and weapons are very dangerous when used outside the dungeons, especially against other humans. The protagonist tells the brat to answer him quickly, causing him to agree. The former leader reiterates that if he sees him using skills like that again, he'll make sure to break his legs. Turning his attention to the rest of the gang, the boy orders everyone to stop right there and tells the fat guy to punch him in the face. The protagonist tells him to hit as hard as he can. After all, they wouldn't want others to know that they failed. Jungwoo says that he doesn't want to attract attention, so they should finish everything as quickly as possible. Still scared, the fat guy asks if he really should punch him, but the protagonist tells him to go for it or he won't succeed. The brat uses all of his strength to punch him. The teachers enter the warehouse just as the brat lands the punch. The teacher approaches, shocked by the blood everywhere. She starts scolding the students, saying that the protagonist was just transferred, but the fat guy says the blood on the floor is his. Another teacher tells all the students to follow him to the coordination office. The teacher asks Ah-hyun to take the protagonist to the infirmary. As she passes by her, Jungwoo says that this body is weaker than he thought. The boy asks what the girl is doing, saying she needs to stop the bleeding and asking her to guide him to the infirmary. The girl doesn't say anything, just looks at him confused. He tells Ah-hyun to forget it, saying he'll take care of it himself. However, she asks who the protagonist really is. Jungwoo says he's just a special admissions student who got what he deserved for stepping out of line, but she says that she saw everything. Ah-hyun remembers when the teachers asked her to look behind the academy. The girl hears some murmurs from inside the warehouse. Sneaking up to the window, she sees the protagonist scolding Ju-seok. The girl is shocked after finally finding them. She asks why he's not in Class A. Irritated, Jungwoo says that's none of her business. He says he wants to remain discreet in the academy and leave as if he had never entered, recommending that she forget everything she saw. Ah-hyun says he's right, and the boy asks her to guide him to the infirmary, but she insists on saying that she's just like him. She admits that initially she saw the boy as an inferior person just because he was a special admission student. The girl apologizes for saying those things about him, and the protagonist accepts, asking her to guide him once more. She asks for his help, saying that it is extremely necessary for her to become a member of the student council. The girl explains that to enter the council, you need a guarantor, especially someone like her who has no accomplishments. He understands and asks if people usually go after the guarantor to eliminate the competition. The girl confirms, saying that's why she can't find one. That's why she's asking him to be her guarantor, but Jungwoo quickly rejects her, saying he's already too busy with his own plans. Ah-hyun says she'll give him anything he asks, but the boy insists that it's not something she can do, telling her he's going to the infirmary. The girl asks if he doesn't want her to explain how the academy works, when he matters, or introduce him to Unche. The protagonist questions if she could really do that, even though she was expelled. Embarrassed, the girl says that it wasn't exactly like that. The girl is clearly uncomfortable with the situation. Ah-hyun says that her sister is a member of the student council, or rather if she becomes one, they'll naturally get closer. He once again loses hope, saying he'll figure it out on his own. Suddenly, he feels very unwell. The girl runs to him as the boy simply collapses to the ground. In another place, an emergency meeting of the teachers is taking place. They are discussing the fact that Ju-seok has already used his abilities more than once. One of the teachers who witnessed the situation says they cannot continue giving him light punishments. An elderly man asks the president for his opinion on the situation. He calls on Professor Yubin. Woo-shik asks if Ju-seok, along with his friends, really attacked Jungwoo. She confirms, saying she saw it in person. He asked again if the protagonist was beaten, and the teacher hesitantly confirms. The man starts laughing, thanking her for the testimony. Recomposing himself, the president says that since this has happened happened more than once, they cannot show impunity. Therefore, Jusok should be expelled. However, someone raises their hand, asking for permission to speak. He asks if he can say something. The teacher says that expelling a student for this would be too severe a punishment. Woo-shik asks why he thinks that. Jungmin says that this was common in their time, claiming that the boy was just excited. Professor Yubin says again that a mistake like this could lead to a serious accident. The man says that Jusok is the future of the academy, and it would not be right for a teacher to diminish that potential because of a single mistake. He tries to make the compromise, saying that the boy did indeed make a mistake by using his abilities on school grounds. With this, he suggests they give him a 1-week suspension to reflect. The president says he'll think about it and decide later, informing everyone afterward. He stands up, saying he will adjourn the meeting for today. Everyone begins to leave. Still inside the room, Jungmin starts smiling as he picks up his phone. He makes a call. On the other end of the line, the minister is waiting for the meeting's conclusion. He informs that the meeting has ended and that it seems everything will be resolved with a suspension. He also reminds that the end-of-month evaluation is coming up, stating that they managed to handle him adequately. Bored, the protagonist realizes that in 3 days he hasn't even managed to see Unche. He says that in his class there are only talentless losers, and because of that, the academy doesn't teach anything about hunting. Mentally, the boy thinks it's not worth standing out. However, someone hits him on the head. Those brats showed up again. They ask if he had been told to heat up their food during the break. They ask if the boy wants to starve them to death, while another says he should teach him a little about common sense. The protagonist is furious, wondering how he became their errand boy. The fat kid says that he has no shame and orders the boy to follow them. The three start leaving the room. After a while, the protagonist is following the brats as they walk through the corridors. Leaving everyone in shock, the boy calls out to them. Jungwoo says that hurt, making them bow and apologize. He asks if the kids are letting their emotions get the better of them. They all desperately deny, assuring that they are acting. The protagonist asks if they looked into what he asked them. The kid says it's impossible for a freshman to get close to someone from the council. In a terrifying manner, the boy asks if that means they didn't find out anything. The fat kid says that apparently Uncha rarely comes to school. The protagonist asks if that's all, but the kid says there's one more thing. She only has one friend in the whole school, another member of the council, Jong-yun. Jungwoo realizes that this is the only useful information and asks them where this boy is now. A bit nervous, the kid explains that Jong-yun doesn't come to school much either. Tired of all this, he says that he shouldn't have trusted these brats, then orders them to leave. He keeps scratching his head in the corridor, trying to find some answer. Akyun appears behind him, saying that she had warned him this wouldn't work. The girl reiterates that because they are members of the student council, no one can get close to them easily. The protagonist says they aren't congressmen, so it shouldn't be that hard, but the girl insists that it's a big deal. She says that the council members are hunters from powerful families with the best skills and a lot of money. The girl explains that in addition to being students, they are also hunters, so they are sent on real missions. She also explains that because their parents are influential, even the teachers are careful with them. The council holds great influence. The girl assures him that they are completely different from regular students. The protagonist asks what the other option is. Excited, she says that all he has to do is help her become a member, but the boy says he won't do that. Akyun asks why he's rejecting so much, even though it doesn't affect him. But he says that the girl literally said they would come after him. Besides, she herself said that only people from important families or with exceptional skills get in. She's neither. The girl asks him to teach her, saying she'll learn quickly and improve her skills, but the protagonist just laughs at her face. With a terrifying look, he says that if she learns from him, she'll end up dead. They both fall silent for a moment. The boy says that he doesn't know why she's so focused on the council, but she shouldn't aim for something that's out of her reach. Suddenly, she claims she doesn't care. The girl says that if she doesn't become a council member, she'd rather just die, asking him again to train her. With an extremely determined look, the girl asks him to teach her anything, whether it's skills, martial arts, or whatever. Jungwoo says that the break time is over and that he's leaving now. The girl asks what he decided about being her guarantor. He genuinely feels happy with the courage of that girl. The protagonist admits that he hasn't seen eyes like that in a long time, saying she might really be interesting. A little later in Class 1E, the teacher is congratulating the students for their great work today. She asks if everyone is aware of a monthly evaluation that will take place this week. Yubin tells them not to relax just because it's a monthly test. After all, their scores last month weren't that great, so they should put in more effort. She explains about the subjects that will be covered, but Jumbin interrupts her lesson. The guy says he's there to warn them about the changes that have occurred in all evaluations from now on. He asks everyone to pay attention, saying that from now on, the first year tests will be held in a real dungeon as part of a practical exam. Most of the students are frightened by this. The teacher becomes extremely irritated, and he asks her to lower her voice in front of the students. She says it's absurd that her students have to take a practical exam. The professor asks if that means they can't do it. Jungmin states that it would be considered expelling someone due to a lack of ability, something discriminatory. He starts asking what they expect from the Hunter Academy. After all, students should at least graduate with the basic qualifications. Mentally, the protagonist realizes that these children weren't even taught how to use their skills, let alone how to hunt. Looking at the professor, Junwoo understands that there is definitely a hidden agenda behind this decision. Junmin says that those who aren't confident can opt out of the exam and take remedial classes, which won't affect their progress. But he adds that the student with special admission cannot opt out, as that would lead to their expulsion. As he leaves, the professor says he will be the one administering the evaluation, and that the students can come to him if they have any questions. The protagonist realizes that the professor couldn't have made this decision alone. There's likely someone with enough power to change the system. In the president's office of the academy, Woo-shik says that it was the minister of the subjugation cabinet of Korea, Myung-jin. The protagonist says that it seems he's now on the minister's blacklist after the incident with Jusok. His subordinate apologizes for all of this. The man continues, saying they have a long relationship at the school and that he is very influential in this field. The president continues complaining, but the protagonist tells him to stop, saying he's not there to listen to his complaints. The man asks what the boy is going to do now, and he replies that he will take the exam. After all, he still hasn't managed to meet Unche. He asks his subordinate if the man has any weapons with him. The protagonist says that he can't enter a dungeon unarmed, stating that any weapon will do, but Woo-shik says he doesn't have anything. This leaves his leader curious and confused. The protagonist grabs his wrists and asks if the man is trying to lie to his superior. Looking at the man's ring, he asks what that is then. The president is shocked when he sees it. That was one of the protagonist's items, the knuckle ring. Grabbing the ring in his hands, the president says his name. Woo-shik assumes that after the death of his leader, he used the ring habitually and forgot about it. He recalls the day they met. The protagonist takes the ring from his hand, telling him to hand it over. The president looks genuinely sad as he watches the boy holding the ring. His subordinate asks if he's sure, but the protagonist says that since it's a low-level dungeon, this should be enough. Before Junwoo can leave the room, Woo-shik calls him. He asks him to avoid coming there frequently, but the boy tells him to stop giving him reasons to visit so often. Junmin was walking through the hallways as usual. Suddenly, he stops in front of a room and knocks on the door. Opening it, he looks inside and sees something that surprises him a little. In front of him was Eunche sitting and working on a computer. The professor asks what brings her to school for the first time, and the girl asks what he wants. Chapman says that this is not a place forbidden for teachers, and that she's acting very arrogantly. But the girl simply ignores him, continuing with her work on the computer. Irritated, he sighs, trying to stay calm. He says that this week there will be a monthly evaluation, and they decided to select a field evaluator from the members of the council. The man warns that this time it will be a practical exam. The girl asks if it really won't be something theoretical, and the professor says that she doesn't need to know the details, asking if she's interested. She says no, stating that her schedule is already full. He asks her to ask the others, but she says that they are all in the same situation. Junmin asks if she wants him to postpone the practical exam, and she says that's a good option. Unchi says that if the exam can't be held without the council members, it's better to ignore it. After all, there's no benefit to them. She asks if the academy will pay her as part of a subjugation, but the man starts yelling, asking if she thinks she's superior to the rest of them. Calling her a delinquent, the professor says that he supported her a lot in her first year, and only because of that did she enter the council. The girl assures him that he helped her because of her grandfather, not because of her. Also telling him that he should have handled the situation more appropriately, treating a member of the council with disrespect. The man asks where she saw that, but someone enters the room. The boy calls him Mr. Cha and asks if it hasn't been a long time since their last meeting, questioning the reason for his visit. Composing himself, the professor says that he's looking for someone from the student council to evaluate the exams. The boy says that in that case he can do it. Smiling, he says that after all, he is also part of the student council. Even the professor admits that this boy is very problematic. Jumpman informs him that the paperwork is on the desk, and that after filling it out, the boy should take it to the teacher's office. Unchi just watches the situation unfold. The girl asks if he doesn't have a subjugation schedule. The boy says he does, but he's going to cancel it. She asks why he's doing that, since even though he doesn't like that professor, he wants to intervene and help. The boy says that in reality it's just a way to keep an eye on him, since he doesn't want something like that incident to happen again. The boy changes the subject, saying that the boy who shouted at Yunchi signed up as a special admission student. Remembering what he said, she's surprised, given that at the time the boy wasn't even a student yet. The boy says he researched the boy and mentions that not only did he humiliate Jusok on his first day, but he is also exempt from the evaluation. He asks if the girl isn't curious to know what kind of person that guy is. After a few days, they were gathered outside the class. The protagonist notices that some students from classes C and D are missing, and that classes A and B seem eager to demonstrate their skills. In contrast, in his class, the only participant is him. However, Junwoo hears someone asking if it will just be the two of them. As the conversation continues, Ah-hyun says that it's good since she won't have to wait her turn. The protagonist asks what the girl is doing there, but she says it's obvious since she's going to take the test. She says she won't be of much help, but she doesn't want to be a burden either. However, Jungwoo gets angry, telling her that the dungeon is no joke. He tells the girl to stop still trying to be kind, asking if she hasn't realized that this was made so that Class E would give up completely. The girl repeats that she needs to become a member of the council, even if it costs her life. She says that even if she takes the remedial classes, her grade won't be good enough if she gives up on this exam. Jungmin asks if everyone is ready, saying that they are not a great risk. However, everyone must remain calm and focused. He explains that the test will take place in a marine-level dungeon or lower, and that groups of 8 people will be formed. He says that after the groups have discussed, the exam will start with Class A and proceed accordingly. However, the student council member who will oversee the exam is someone known to everyone. Jong Yeon introduces himself to the freshmen. The protagonist notices that the name sounds familiar to him. The teacher calls for the students of Class E. He explains that due to the lack of participants, the two will be merged with the remaining students from Class D. The boys from Jusuk's gang greet him while trying to maintain their act. Even Ah-hyun comments that their acting is getting worse. Other people complain, saying it was bad luck to be grouped with that pair. They start saying that they'll have to act as if there aren't 2 extra members. One of the boys apologizes to the protagonist, saying he'll talk to him later, but Jungwoo says this will actually make things easier. He asks what information has been provided about the dungeon they are heading into. One of the boys hands him a tablet, asking him to take a look. However, the way he hands it over makes everyone stare at the group. He resumes his act, calling the protagonist a useless delinquent and ordering him to gather the information for the group. A little later, both the teacher and Jong Yeon ask if everyone is ready, affirming that they now understand combat and progression. Jungmin says that the exam ends as soon as they completely defeat the boss. He looks at the students, saying that this isn't anything special. The protagonist just stares at him without saying anything. With that, they enter the dungeon, and the test begins. They walk through the dungeon while the protagonist looks at something on the tablet. The boy realizes this is a classic scenario, a dungeon with cave-type monsters. Suddenly, something catches his attention. Several rat-like monsters come charging toward them. The students are terrified, urging their teammates to prepare for combat. The boys start accessing their systems to activate their abilities. The protagonist remains still, wanting to measure how useful his companions are. One of them uses wind magic. Another was a combat marksman and uses a slingshot. The bulky one uses the berserk ability, being from the enhancement class. They begin attacking the monsters. A sniper hits several projectiles on their enemies. The bulky one protects one of his friends who was about to be attacked. As expected, Junwoo was disappointed by the group's extreme disorganization, as they just swung their weapons aimlessly. The same people who had criticized him and Ah-hyun were using their weapons without even knowing how to wield them properly. The only person who was even slightly interesting to observe was the girl who was using her fire magic and the blue flame ability. She managed to hit the monsters and defeat them easily. She was able to take down several at once. Remembering that in Class E they don't learn about combat, the protagonist realizes that the girl must have studied on her own. Junwoo says that for a brat, she's truly impressive even if she's still at a beginner level. Everyone was extremely tired, wondering if this would ever end. Suddenly, one of the monsters attacks a member from behind. The protagonist equips his patello ring. He uses the same attack he used against Wushik, but this time on a stone. As a result, he simply blasts a hole through the monster. The boy who was about to be attacked is utterly terrified. Junwoo tells the boy to use his abilities with more precision, otherwise he'll always get exhausted quickly. They start criticizing the protagonist, saying he's trying to earn points the easy way and telling him to stay out of it. The protagonist becomes extremely irritated, but someone starts calling him, trying to calm him down. The boys from his gang begin asking if they can really handle this, saying it's harder than they imagined. Junwoo scratches his head angrily again. He notices that no one realized they were almost killed, and even though they're still at the start of the dungeon, they already have no stamina left. The only one who could still move forward with him was Ah-hyun, but he couldn't trust the girl either. He admits he could go alone if they're being watched, and he also senses something is wrong. The protagonist approaches the teacher, asking if the dungeon's condition doesn't seem a bit strange. The boy says the monsters are low level, but there are too many of them. They're still at the entrance, and yet they're already exhausted. He says there's something odd inside and suggests they halt the hunt. The teacher says the boy is being arrogant and that it's his decision to make. Junwoo says that at this pace an accident will happen and tells Jungmin not to regret this choice later. The teacher shouts, asking if anyone wants to quit the exam because they're exhausted. Everyone looks at each other, but despite being tired, they say nothing. Even the 3 who almost died remain silent. Jungmin says that none of them want to quit and that if the protagonist is exhausted, he should leave and not try to drag his teammates down. He warns that if the boy interrupts the exam again to say useless things, he will be disqualified. Someone places a hand on his shoulder, asking him not to worry. There was Jong Yeon saying that if a dangerous situation arises, he will intervene. The boy says that even though it might not seem like it, he's still a member of the council, and asks the protagonist to trust him this time. Junwoo just just observes without saying anything. Back inside the dungeon, everyone is excited to realize they've reached the boss room. A large door stands in front of them, but everyone is extremely tired and remains quiet in front of the gate. The protagonist takes a deep breath, already expecting something bad. Mentally, he's already out of patience. He steps forward and says he'll open the door, asking if anyone objects. But Ah-hyun says they'll open it together. The boy says this is a door he can open on his own, but she insists. She starts saying that the protagonist is probably laughing inside, thinking everyone else is scared. He just grumbles as he walks toward the door. The two begin opening the gate, but the ex-leader becomes extremely frightened when he sees something. In front of them, a giant monster was clearly dead. It was a massive rat lying lifeless. At that moment, everyone begins to feel very scared, realizing that this was the boss. The teacher asks Jong-yeon if this is the dungeon they were practicing in, but the boy says it seems to be active. The protagonist approaches the monster's body and starts analyzing its wounds. Suddenly, he declares that this is dungeon interference. Jung-woo shouts, ordering everyone to retreat. The kids following them begin to panic, asking why so suddenly. He repeats that this is dungeon interference and tells everyone to retreat. However, in front of them, a large shadow appears. The protagonist looks directly at the monster. A giant fox-like creature stood before them. Everyone is utterly terrified. Jung-woo explains that dungeon interference happens when a stronger boss defeats a weaker one and invades the dungeon. Both Jungmin and the student council member are visibly frightened by this. Ah-hyun is paralyzed with fear, while the protagonist states that this is the worst situation that could have developed. This was a green-ranked boss, the three-tailed feline. He states that this is disastrous. After all, this is a green-ranked boss in a purple-ranked dungeon. Everyone in his group starts running out of the boss room. The feline leaps to try to stop them. It lands on the ground, causing massive destruction and blocking their escape. Jong-yeon asks everyone to stay behind him. He connects to the system and activates his rank C abilities. A type of golden spike begins to emanate. A yellowish aura surrounds his body. The boy is from the physical enhancement category and uses the porcupine ability. He asks the protagonist to help him since he won't be able to face a green-ranked enemy alone. Jung-woo is surprised by the boy's words. The council member apologizes to the boy, saying he has researched him for some time. He says the protagonist is exempt from the evaluation judgment and asserts that now is not the time for him to hide his abilities. With all this, Jung-woo becomes genuinely worried about so many people knowing this. Recalling his test moment, the system had warned that his power level was immeasurable. The boy asks the president if there's any way to fake it. After all, it seems to attract too much attention. But Woo-shik says these are tasks where he cannot exercise his authority in that way. The guy assures him that if the protagonist stays quiet, the teachers will simply ignore him. He says that because it's a task where he cannot exercise authority, it also means people consider it very important. The protagonist gets irritated, saying he shouldn't have been so soft back then. Jung-woo decides not to make it too obvious, telling his companion that he doesn't really understand what he means. The monster prepares to attack the two of them. Jong-yeon notices the feline's movement. He also prepares a strike, spotting an opening. Moving his arms, he launches several spikes toward the creature. They hit several points on it, causing the monster to lose balance momentarily. The council member leaps toward the beast. He shouts while preparing another strike. The guy hits the feline's head. The monster screams in pain as its eyes glow golden. The students are astonished by Jong-yeon's level of strength, realizing how weak they are in comparison. Some of them start saying that the specially admitted student isn't doing anything. Another says the senior is trying to help the specially admitted student, but mentally, he was trying to understand and discover something about the protagonist. Jong-yeon continues attacking the monster with his spikes. The guy is extremely surprised, realizing he's never had such an easy fight. He says that being able to fight a green-ranked monster so easily feels like someone is handing it to him on a silver platter. Suddenly, he locks eyes with the protagonist and realizes that it's probably him who's making this happen. The boss takes advantage of his distraction to try to attack him. However, the protagonist hits a stone with his explosive flow directed at the feline. Because of this, the council member manages to dodge. He finally understands that this is why every time the monster tried to attack him, its attacks were interrupted. The boy also remembers reading in the manual about a strategy like this to destabilize an enemy, but it's practically impossible. On top of all this, his companion is using the technique without anyone noticing, but he snaps back to focus, saying that right now he needs to concentrate on the hunt, landing a powerful strike right on the boss's forehead. His spike pierces its skull. They had finally defeated the boss. All the students are extremely impressed with that battle. They begin to revere the council member. The teacher feels relieved that the incident from 2 years ago didn't repeat itself. Mentally, he declares that since Junwoo received his evaluation exemption incorrectly, he'll use this as grounds to expel him. The protagonist shouts, saying the monster is still alive. He tells everyone to stand back because it's dangerous, but someone shouts, calling out the specially admitted student. It was that same Brad who jumps on the monster, saying the protagonist just wants to score a few extra points by saying those things. He begins declaring that the final blow is his. However, the beast opens its eyes. It moves to kill the boy, who freezes in fear. The protagonist curses him while rushing in his direction. Jonghyun manages to save him, but ends up losing one of his arms. He spits blood after taking the attack. The boy stares at the scene, terrified. Everyone is horrified by this unexpected turn of events. The council member is lying on the ground, losing a lot of blood from the wound. Everyone begins to run desperately away from the monster. Akyeon is frozen with fear, wondering what she should do and how she should act. The monster heads toward her. The girl talks to herself, trying to stay calm, convincing herself that her firepower should be effective against a feline. But she was so scared she couldn't move. Her breathing became extremely heavy. She kept saying this was impossible. Her body trembled and she could barely stand. The boss opens its mouth as it moves to attack her. However, the protagonist uses his explosive flow ability, but now he had used the hard punch ability. The boy throws the monster far away. The girl snaps back to reality after seeing this happen in front of her. Observing him, she notices that the protagonist was different from before. The creature crashes to the ground with a loud thud. She calls out to him, but the boy walks past without saying anything. The council member was lying on the ground, while the boy he had saved was crying over his body. He was completely horrified by the situation. In a chilling manner, the protagonist orders the boy to stop crying and take his senior with him. He tells the chubby one to go help them carry the body, ordering the rest to stay still in a corner. Junwoo assumes this was his mistake. He hesitated instead of dealing with all of this alone, effortlessly dodging the monster's attacks. The protagonist remained extremely irritated while standing still. The monster's three tails had their tips glowing purple as they closed in on the boy. He easily dodges them all, activating his ring's ability. Quickly, the boy lands a powerful upward blow on the feline's jaw. The monster bleeds heavily as it collapses to the ground. Before it could fall, the protagonist prepares another strike. He delivers a crushing sequence, giving the boss no chance to defend itself. The students watching were stunned by his strength. Even those who already knew about his strength were surprised by the true scale of his power. Jamin was terrified, wondering what he was witnessing. In the worst possible way, he understands that the protagonist wasn't exempt from evaluation by mistake. With this level of power, he was already stronger than most seniors and was even using an ancient supernatural weapon. The teacher begins to warn him that it's dangerous to use his supernatural weapon. Junwoo looks at him but simply ignores him. But the boy realizes that Jamin is probably talking about the punishment. All supernatural weapons have their own penalty, which can vary, sometimes even killing the user. Even so, he prefers to use them, as the bracelets grant the ability to harness the attacks of monsters that serve as cores. On the other hand, supernatural weapons maximizing monster core's power and shape it into a suitable form for the hunter. He explains that the new method reduced the entry barrier, but the new generation is very weak and stronger monsters require more power. Suddenly, he gets distracted for a moment and the monster takes advantage. The girl screams, telling him to be careful. The beast launches a massive slash toward the protagonist. Surprisingly, he had simply vanished from the beast's sight. He activates his ability again, causing the creature to look upward. The protagonist spins like a bee-blade in the air, using rotational force to deliver a stronger attack, landing a powerful blow on the monster's head. The strike was so powerful it caused a shockwave. It also generated a smoke cloud from the impact. As it begins to clear, the boy stands in the middle of the battlefield. Junwoo was staring at the monster while the ring's penalty, the Fear Devourer, was active. The boss stares at the boy's figure. The massive feline begins to tremble in fear as the ring's penalty takes effect. Patlos, a green-ranked monster the protagonist had hunted in a distant past, cannot be defeated if it feels fear. The penalty of this ring is that the first to feel fear dies, or rather, for him to win, he only needs to make his enemy fear him. Junwoo approaches them, asking if the student council member is okay. He notices the boy is still alive but losing blood very quickly. The protagonist asks the teacher for the walkie-talkie so he can report the situation to the control center. Jamin begins doing as he was told. The guy hands over the radio so the protagonist can call for help. Formally, he alerts the control team that the final training group has completed the dungeon, but there is a casualty. He reports that the dungeon changed from purple to green due to interference, and that there is a B3 injured student with severe blood loss. The protagonist informs them they are leaving now and asks the control center to send a rescue team. They ask for the injured student's name. He says it's a third-year student named Jonghyun and tells them to alert the person in charge. Jamin asks for his true identity. Seeing that he was ignored, the man starts shouting, demanding to know what the protagonist is and ordering him to answer. To Jamin's surprise, a boy punches him in the face. Out of patience, Junwoo strikes the teacher's face. After falling to the ground, the protagonist begins cursing the man. Jamin tries to complain, but the boy asks if he's really a supervisor, saying he can't even analyze the situation. With a menacing look, he orders the teacher to shut up or face consequences. The man simply becomes too scared and decides not to test his patience. After some time, they were already leaving the dungeon and meeting with the rescue team. Jonghyun begins to be transported to the hospital. The president approaches, asking if his leader is okay. Woo-shik says that apparently he couldn't restrain himself. Irritated, the protagonist replies that thanks to that, no one someone died. His subordinate complains, saying that now everyone will know about him, but the boy calls the man by name. Angry, he says that a teacher from that school sent unprepared students into the dungeon, trying to get rid of him. He asks if his companion really thinks that makes sense. Wushik looks terrified as he stares at his leader. He warns that if something like this happens again, he won't stand by quietly, and he asks the president not to make him return to his active days. At another moment, the teacher was standing in front of Wushik. Angry, he asks if there really weren't any problems during the test, reminding Jimin that he was the one who recommended the practical test. But the teacher claims that there's no connection between the decision and the incident, saying it was meant to address educational inequality. The president begins to say that even in situations like this, he keeps trying to find excuses for his mistakes. He asks if the guy really thought he wouldn't find out that this test was an attempt to get rid of Junwoo. The teacher is surprised that the president said this so directly, even knowing that Wushik would notice. He wonders if there might be someone else close to the minister, but concludes that's not the case. Jimin says the test followed all procedures and no one was forced to participate in the subjugation or exposed to any danger. He keeps trying to explain himself, but the president slams the table, saying the problem was the sudden switch to the practical test. Wushik says that 60 points are required to pass the test, and an ordinary special admission student would never make it. The teacher says that Junwoo is not an ordinary student, having received exemption from evaluation and still being the best in this test. Jimin reaffirms that this was an incident caused by a natural disaster called dungeon interference. Moreover, this test was also approved by the president himself. Out of arguments, Wushik remains silent. Closing his eyes, he says it's fine. He orders the teacher to submit a report by the end of the day, saying he and the control team will review the bodycam footage and make their decision. The teacher leaves the room convinced that everything went well. Suddenly, the president says he must make one thing clear, stating that he does not fear Minister Memjin. He says that until now, the only person he fears is Junwoo from 40 years ago. The teacher asks what he means, and Wushik says that if something like this happens again, he won't be able to save Jimin. With that, the man is slightly frightened. Outside the room, he seems lost in thought. Finally relaxing a little, he loosens his tie. He quickly calls the minister, informing him that the matter will be handled internally. Thanks to Jongyum's father being a corrupt police officer, it didn't accuse the teacher of the incident. The minister says that initially that boy wasn't even an official candidate, and that you should be grateful to teacher Jimin for that. The man starts apologizing about the special admission student, saying his abilities were beyond expectations. Memjin asks if the student truly had the abilities to justify his admission. The teacher feels awkward answering, but the minister presses him, saying that as a member of the parent council, he believes the first-year council members have already been determined, and asks his opinion. Jimin simply agrees with the minister while being instructed to handle everything appropriately. Memjin says he's been working hard and is probably tired of teaching, inviting him to lunch. After the call ends, the teacher finally sighs in relief. Remembering the protagonist, the man admits that he's not at his student's level, being stronger than most veterans. But at the same time, this will be his last chance, so he must find a way to deal with Junwoo. At a large hospital, the protagonist was anxiously staring at something while someone said that it would hurt. The nurse places cotton on his wound, causing the boy to scream. The woman tells him not to lie down until it dries, and that if it starts bleeding, he should call her. Ahyun says he's whining like a baby over a small scratch, but he tells her to shut up because pain is pain. Mentally, he wonders if this is because he hasn't used supernatural weapons in a long time or because his body has changed. Junwoo says the girl keeps coming there every day to bother him, telling her to stop visiting him. She says she'll stop if he promises to help her. The protagonist asks if she's still set on joining the student council, wondering how many times he'll have to refuse. The boy says it's none of his business whether she gets in or not, and besides, he doesn't have time to help her. Someone says that entering the student council won't be easy anyway, and at that moment, a hand appears through the curtains. The girl says she heard he was transferred to that room and asks if the boy is okay. They ask if Jongyun has improved a little, and he claims that apparently he won't die, though it still hurts. The council member asks if the boy he saved really quit on the same day after the practical exam. Junwoo says that guy was a coward and didn't even thank the person who saved his life. Jongyun says being alive is what matters. Looking at the boy, the protagonist asks if he's not being overly optimistic, even after losing an arm. The council member goes quiet for a moment. He says his father always told him that as long as he's alive, he can overcome anything. With a smile, the boy says that since he's not dead, everything will work out in the end, leaving the protagonist speechless. Junwoo admits that people like this boy have been rare since his past life, and that he even found him suspicious at first. The protagonist says it's been a long time since he's heard words like those. Ahyun asks what he meant by difficult earlier. Jongyun says he heard their conversation and says it will be very difficult to join the student council now. She asks if it's because she's in Class E, but he denies it, saying that's not the reason. The boy asks if they've ever heard of the Parent Association. Ahyun says that from the way he describes it, it doesn't sound like an ordinary parent group, which her senior confirms. He also explains that in the first year, the association consists of 5 parents with 5 children, and coincidentally, the limit of student council members per grade is also 5, 5, asking their opinion about that. This is a group of influential parents who have already decided their children will be council members. Ah Hyun asks if that's how he became a member, but he denies it, saying he was a reserve and got in because of an extra spot. The protagonist says that any minimally influential group decides the members and eliminates the competition. Suddenly, Jungwoo asks if students have ever died during this process. Disheartened, the boy asks if that's not clear enough already. Jonghyun says that even though it's not good to say such things, he asks the girl to give up on becoming a council member. She says she won't do that, becoming outraged that other students competing might also die. The girl tries to use this to her advantage, asking if the protagonist doesn't find this ridiculous. He sees that the corruption within the academy puts students' lives at risk, and even though he wants to help, the rebirth of Gigantiana is worse. The boy insists he doesn't have time for these things before meeting Eunchae. With that, Jonghyun says she arrived just in time. Behind them was Eunchae, and Jonghyun says she had come to visit him. The girl approaches them while both stand speechless. The protagonist is incredulous that things have taken this turn. Jungwoo stands up and walks towards Eunchae. As they approach, the protagonist mentions that it has been a long time since they last saw each other. But the girl simply ignores him and walks towards her sister. Ah-hyun says that it's been 2 years since Eunchae told her to quit the academy. The girl asks what her sister will do now that she's already enrolled, but Eunchae remains silent. Both the protagonist and Jonghyun just watch the two. Jungwoo says he doesn't know what happened between them, but apparently there's a deep resentment between the two. And maybe that's why Ah-hyun is so determined to join the student council. The girl starts walking away, saying she's leaving first. The protagonist asks if she's already going. Surprisingly, Eunchae asks if her sister is hurt anywhere. She looks at the girl. Ah-hyun composes herself and asks if Eunchae is really going to pretend to care. Jonghyun, trying to lighten the mood, approaches them and asks if they know each other. But the protagonist and the girl just ignore him while staring at each other. Mentally, the boy confesses that he can't stay there. It feels like he's suffocating. The council member begins to leave, saying he's going for a walk. But Jungwoo asks Eunchae to talk outside. Without saying anything, both walk past the boy, leaving him behind. He is left alone in the room, not knowing what just happened. In the hallway, the two face each other in silence. The girl asks the protagonist what kind of problem he has with her. He admits to himself that he hadn't planned how this conversation would go when they finally met. The boy hesitates, unsure whether to ask to meet Seok-do or say he's a fan, but concludes that neither would work. The girl says she heard he completed the subjugation exam alone and asks if it's true. The protagonist denies it, saying his senior did all the work and he just finished it, but the girl insists that he wouldn't be capable of that. Eunchae says that even in a situation like that, he managed to perform well, implying that the advice she gave him wasn't in vain. The protagonist feels slightly irritated by how she spoke about Jonghyun. With a mocking expression, he says the girl seems a bit full of herself. She asks if he's trying to provoke her. Jungwoo denies it, saying he wanted to meet her to make peace. The girl asks if he wants to join the council. Eunchae asks if he's trying to make connections, assuring him that with his abilities, he doesn't need to. He quickly replies that he has no interest in becoming a council member. The girl asks him to let her say something. Extremely angry, she says she doesn't care if he wants to join the council, but he shouldn't involve her sister in it. Losing his patience, the protagonist says the two are alike. They don't listen to anyone, whether involving themselves or others. He says the only person who wants to become a council member is Ah-hyun. The boy says that either way he needs to resolve something with the girl's grandfather. She doesn't let him finish speaking and pins him against the wall. Eunchae demands he tell her everything her sister asked him. The girl asks if Ah-hyun asked him to help her get the position or to take revenge for her. Irritated, the boy braces his foot against the wall. Using his momentum, he reverses the situation, throwing the girl backward. However, she stops and starts spinning her body. She attempts to land a knee strike on the boy. The protagonist releases her arms and protects his face. Eunchae starts trying to punch him. Taking a step back, they stare at each other. The protagonist notices that this time is completely different from the last. He realizes that this level is far too advanced for someone her age. The girl quickly approaches, preparing to strike him. While dodging the attack, Jungwoo admits he underestimated this girl. He wonders why she didn't seem so skilled during the last public subjugation. The boy dodges one of the attacks and takes advantage of an opening. He begins to remove the bandage from his arm, throwing it into the girl's face. Before she can recover, the protagonist already has his arm around her neck. Cornered against the wall, the girl asks if this isn't against the rules. He asks if there are any rules at the school. The girl says that for a special admission student, he's adapting quickly. Several people watch the scene as the two discuss the last subjugation. The girl claims that the field is different from what he imagines. It doesn't matter how you complete it. What matters is captivating the crowd. But he just looks at her without saying anything. She asks what he needs. The protagonist says it's nothing too important, just that she talked to her grandfather. Jungwoo says he needs her to bring in weapons from headquarters, but she immediately states that it's impossible. The protagonist says he heard they are only for display, and as the director of the support headquarters, her grandfather could probably move a few. A nurse approaches, asking them to stop, while Eunchae insists it's impossible to convince her grandfather. The nurse tells them they can't cause trouble there. Jungwoo looks in their direction, startled. The girl smacks his hand, making him release her. She simply walks away without saying anything. Jungwoo says they'll see each other soon, but the girl says she never wants to see him again. The boy replies that it will be difficult, especially since she's Seok-Doo's granddaughter. He returns to his hospital room. His friend asks if the conversation went well, but the protagonist says it didn't. The boy says he figured as much. Jungwoo questions whether Yeonchi's relationship with her grandfather isn't very good. Jonghyun assures him that it's neither very good nor very bad, saying it seems more formal. The protagonist asks if it's not like a typical family, to which his friend confirms. The boy asks what they talked about. He says he wanted her to ask Seok-Doo for something, but she said it's impossible. His friend says that makes sense. After all, she's never asked him for anything, plus the old man is very intimidating. Jonghyun says it's a delicate subject and they shouldn't discuss it there. The boy starts laughing, saying it's entirely the protagonist's fault for making such a one-sided request. He asks if he should give money, but Jonghyun says Eunchi doesn't need money. However, there's something that could catch her attention. The boy asks what that would be. He states it would be Ah-hyun quitting the academy. His friend says he doesn't know the reason, but she really doesn't like her sister being at the school. Recalling her reaction after he mentioned that Ah-hyun wanted to join the council, the boy says that if they can persuade the girl to quit, maybe she'll grant their request. Suddenly, Jungwoo asks for silence. They see that Ah-hyun was listening to their conversation. Outside the hospital, the girl was sitting on a bench, clearly discouraged, remembering her companion's conversation. Mentally, she confesses that she wants to become a member of the student council to confront Seok-Doo and take revenge on that old man. But she also confesses that she knows that with her abilities, it will be difficult to graduate on her own. That's why she would need Jungwoo, someone who is beyond her class level. Extremely demotivated, she states that there's no reason for someone like that guy to help her without getting anything in return. She says it's okay, after all, this always happens. She'll have to deal with everything alone again. Suddenly, someone appears, catching her attention. He asks who she thinks she is to act so pathetically, while still being so inexperienced. The boy asks if she's going home, and the girl says she was about to. He starts sitting down, asking if perhaps she was thinking of giving up, causing the girl to feel a kind of apprehension. The girl becomes extremely irritated, saying she would never do that. The protagonist smiles, confessing that was what he expected to hear. He keeps smiling while staring into nothingness. The boy says he fought with her sister earlier. Shocked, Ah-hyun asks if they really fought. The protagonist confirms and says she's quite skilled. He says it's complicated, especially given his situation. After all, the first impression was a mess, and the second time they fought. The boy says he's going to change the plan. Instead of trying to convince her, he'll threaten her. Ah-hyun calls him disgusting. The girl asks how he plans to do that. The protagonist says he'll use her weakness. The girl asks if her sister has one. He simply points at the girl, saying that she is Eunchi's weakness. Jungwoo tells her to think carefully. Her sister is the student leader, a hunter ranked at the top, and the granddaughter of someone influential. Why would Eunchi care about an irrelevant, classy person like her? After all, no matter what she does, she would never reach her sister's level. And the other reason she doesn't want her sister at the Hunter Academy. Having Ah-hyun there represents a threat to her career. Or perhaps she's afraid her sister might take her position. The girl claims to know how to self-evaluate, saying that doesn't make sense, but the protagonist tells her to make it make sense. She grows curious about those words. He says she needs to know enough about Eunchi's position so they can find a weakness. The girl doesn't know what to say, her mouth hanging open at the idea. The protagonist asks if she's not confident in herself. Ah-hyun pauses to think for a moment. Suddenly, the girl shouts, saying she can't do it. The little psychopath just smiles at the situation. He stands up, saying that in that case, the conversation is over. Jungwoo says he warned her about events that wouldn't take long to happen, and that starting tomorrow, they'll begin, so she should prepare herself. He says the goal now is to make her a candidate for the student council before the start of the second semester. The girl asks what that means, but the boy says it's exactly what she imagines. The protagonist says the Parents Association needs one of them defeated. He asks if the girl understands as he walks away. The girl calls out his name again. With tears in her eyes, she thanks him for his help. The guy, completely impatient, just waves his hand as he leaves. Later, at a sushi restaurant, a man asks if Taehyung is okay. Another guy says children are always like that, and that he's worried now that Taehyung has softened since joining Class A. They were talking about the practical exams and their children at a table full of fancy food. Suddenly, another person arrives to join them. There was the teacher, who apologizes for being late, while the other men ask him to sit. They asked if Jimin is okay, saying they were worried that the accident might cause problems in the council selection. At this table were gathered all the parents who were part of the first-year association. The teacher asks if they can start discussing the main topic. Hey everyone, did you enjoy this story? I really liked it. If you want to follow the next part, make sure to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next story, guys.